Well, it's been a difficult last 12 to 18 months for everybody, but how good is it to have football back? How good is it to have football in London and it feel like a home tournament?
Look, we've had a dark and traumatic last 15, 16 months. It's just been awful. And you know the power of football to bring people together, to raise morale. And we've only had one game so far, we won. And I tell you this, people are smiling today. You can see the body language. And just imagine if we progress during the tournament, the difference it will make to our spirits, but also, got to be honest, our economy as well.
How difficult is it to manage gatherings during a pandemic? Obviously, at this moment in time, you've got these what would be hubs all over London. Is it difficult with the social distancing, the changing rules?
It's a nightmare. We've had to work a number of different scenarios based upon what the guidelines are going to be. UEFA have been great, the FA have been great. The different councils, sometimes they can be challenging for good reasons. Governments, we've had to work through with the guidelines, but we tried to make this tournament the best ever, but the safest ever. So we've got restrictions on the numbers in the fan zone, restrictions on those at the football village here, and we're hoping as restrictions are lifted, we can get more fans and more ordinary people enjoying the difference a tournament can make.
How are you going to manage the England-Scotland game on Friday evening? Because ordinarily when Scotland play in England, there is an invasion of tens of thousands of Scottish fans coming down to Trafalgar Square. Do you anticipate that happening? Or do you anticipate that they will just stay off because of the guidelines that are in place at the moment?
Well, you've played in one of those games, you know how special they are. They're special for fans as well. If I'm honest, the concern we have is ordinarily Scottish fans who love their team come to London. If they can't go to the game, they go to Trafalgar Square, and there's an atmosphere that's memorable. Trafalgar Square is now being used for a fan zone, and key workers will be watching the game on Friday. And frankly speaking, my message to our friends in Scotland is, unless you've got a ticket for the game, unless you've got somewhere safe to watch the game, please don't come down. I'll tell you why, because we're still in the middle of a pandemic, the rules are still there, and Trafalgar Square is not available. And what we don't want is being distracted by looking after Scottish fans when many of us want to focus on the game and looking after our key workers as well.
You've spoken out in the last week very strongly about the need for London to reopen. We're just here on the edge of the city. It's a ghost town. It's perilous at this moment in time for businesses, isn't it?
I'm really worried about the future of our city and our country going forward. This pandemic is the biggest crisis we've faced economically, socially, culturally since the Second World War. And we need the same sort of boldness our forefathers and foremothers had after the Second World War. I worry about the fact that 1 in 5 jobs in our city are in retail, culture or hospitality. Many businesses will go bust. Businesses going bust means families left in destitute, mass unemployment. There's got to be proper business rates relief. There's got to be support for businesses in relation to the furlough. But even then, I worry, Gary, about potential mass unemployment because the government's not got a grip on international travel, on quarantining, and businesses will suffer who were successful before the pandemic.
We've had 2 or 3 sort of dress rehearsals on this. We know that they're not going to put the correct financial support in place. We know they're going to continue to change their message. They're going to give late notice to businesses, which, I've got hospitality business as well in the north of England. So where do we go here? We've got the vulnerable double vaccinated. Where are we heading here? Because if we're still locking down beyond double vaccination of the vulnerable, are we locking down forever?
Well, I think the government's moving the goalposts, forgive the pun, because the government had 4 tests. One of them was getting the vaccine rolled out. We've had more than 8 million doses in London, brilliant across the country. They wanted confirmation that the vaccine works. It does work. They wanted to make sure there was space in hospitals. There is space in hospitals. And they were worried about new variants. The good news is the vaccine does appear to be working against the Delta variant. So many businesses are a bit confused. We've made huge sacrifices. We've all got the jab. We're following the rules, and even then at the 11th hour, the government's moving the goalposts. And I really do worry, I share your concerns. That's why with business leaders across our city, I wrote to the Prime Minister on Friday, saying to the Prime Minister in a cool, calm way, we understand the health of individuals is interlinked with the health of our businesses. We get that, but actually we've done all you asked us to do. As you said, we need proper financial support, because you know what, it makes sense to support businesses now, because if they go bust, to restart a business is a nightmare. To keep them afloat is far cheaper in the long term.
In terms of generally just around Labour's position in the last 12 months, I've become personally frustrated because I felt the abstaining on Brexit and the abstaining on the tier system pre-Christmas was when I think there really could have been an action against this government in terms of tackling these what would be inconsistent lockdowns, the different approaches to different sectors of the country. Now we're seeing it again, and yet the polls seem to suggest that there is popularity for their decisions. Have Labour missed the boat on this? Have you missed the boat on this? Has the Manchester Mayor missed the boat on this because you've supported in the past lockdown positions?
Yeah, I think your views are very fair. I think the problem is this, when you're in opposition, there is a conundrum. when do you, in the national interest, work with the governing party for the interest of everybody, and when do you oppose? And there's that balancing act between followership and leadership. And I'm somebody who believes in leadership, and I've been criticised for having, verbal fisticuffs with the Prime Minister, because I believe I should be the champion and advocate for our city. It's a bit different when you're the leader of the Labour Party, because you're the leader of the entire countries, and it's why it's really important that whether you live in England, Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, you feel the Labour Party is speaking for you. I think on reflection and hindsight, we may as a national party have got some things right, some things maybe not quite right, and we've got to learn from that, have the humility to listen to, critical friends like you and say, you know what, if people like Neville is criticising us, let's take on board what he's saying, but at the same time, we've got to provide a viable, sensible alternative to a Tory government who are out of touch, let's be clear, with the vast majority of the country, but are still 10 points ahead in the polls.
They are, and I think that's the mystifying thing to everybody. But in terms of the Delta variant, it was over here in April. 2 or 3 months it's been here now. The vaccine, as you've said, does seem to be combating it in terms of hospitalisations. Can you just give us some specifics at this moment in time in London around hospitalisations compared to, say, 2 or 3 months ago, and why you're now suggesting that London needs to unlock completely and go back to normal?
Well, firstly, the government decided to bring in restrictions to countries in and around India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, not India.
Yeah.
Because the Prime Minister wanted a trade deal with India and didn't want to upset them. And that led to the Delta variant coming to our country more than it otherwise would have done. So I think the Prime Minister got to answer the question why he didn't bring down stricter action sooner rather than later, firstly. Secondly, the good news is, in London, we're seeing the numbers of people in hospital because they've got the virus relatively low compared to wave 2 and wave 1. The numbers who are in intensive care relatively low compared to wave 2 and wave 1. But also, God forbid, if there was a massive increase in numbers who needed to go to hospital, we've got sufficient capacity to look after them. And the basic reason for that is because most Londoners are getting the jab. Not just the one jab, I've now got both jabs, and many Londoners are now receiving both jabs. So we know the jab breaks the link between the virus and serious consequences. So it begs the question, the roadmap the Prime Minister published, which I supported, national interest, laid out a roadmap. The 4 tests are there. It's for the Prime Minister to explain why his 4 tests, in his view, haven't been met, but also if they haven't been met, what he's going to do to support the health of our economy, because I worry about retail, leisure, tourism, culture, hospitality. If these people aren't working, it means more of a burden on the Treasury's coffers in unemployment benefit and so forth. So it's in the government's interest to support these businesses.
Bringing it back to football and the impact upon this tournament, there's 20,000 fans at the moment in Wembley. The extension will be in place. Will that mean that it'll only be 20,000 in the latter stages of the tournament, or will that increase to the 40, 50, 60,000 that we anticipated pre-tournament?
So we're working really closely with UEFA, the FA and the local council, Brent, to try and increase the number of fans allowed at Wembley. 22,500 is about a quarter of the capacity of 90,000. We're hoping we can take that higher, because you will be aware we've had really successful sporting events which have been piloted. I think very few people, if any, have caught the virus because going to one of the test events. So what we're saying to the government and the council is, look, it's possible to organise safe events with larger numbers of fans. We're hoping for the last 16 to double the 22,500. We're in conversations with UEFA, FA, the government and the council, and I keep my fingers crossed for the possibility of the final there being 90,000 at Wembley. It's not impossible yet, and if we make good progress, we can get there, and it's possible to do it safely. I think it's possible to have a successful games and a safe games.
And finally, I seem to be doomed in my post-football career that I have to work with one Liverpool fan on Sky Sports, and the first mayor...
You're blessed, Gary, you're blessed.
The first mayor that I've ever interviewed is a Liverpool fan. How does that work? I thought all sort of people who were born down here who supported northern teams were united. These Cockney Red type thing.
Whatever. Listen, there's a great saying somebody once told me, you can change your job, you can change your partner even, you don't change the team you support. And I've been a Liverpool fan since I was little. I remember the great teams of Souness, Dalglish and Rush, actually pasting your boys in the 80s and stuff. But you don't change your team, and I think the current team is great. I think Klopp's a great manager. I think Salah and Mane have done more to address the issue of Islamophobia, besides being great players, than any speech I could have done. And I'm hoping that one of the examples of football is seeing that a United a legend can be educated of the right ways by Liverpool fans, and even Carragher as well.
I don't mean to come off a jovial note, but you've just mentioned Islamophobia there. I was a little bit unnerved by the fact that there were less boos at Wembley for the players taking the knee and having the fact that the players explained the reason behind it. But should we really be celebrating the fact that a few more people were silenced and only a few people booed?
I tell you this, one of the things that we should both admire is our manager. I mean, Gareth Southgate, what a man. What leadership he's shown. And what he's done, by the way, he's managed to have a team that reflects the diversity of our country, north, south, east, west, black, white, different backgrounds. But also they seem to have this team spirit which says, you know what, we're going to stand in solidarity with anybody who faces racism, discrimination and bias. That includes, by the way, the likes of Raheem Sterling, Marcus Rashford. And we're going to take on the argument that we're somehow Marxists or we believe in defunding the police. And you know what? What was lovely about Wembley, you're right, should we be celebrating the fact only a few booed our team, is the vast majority, their applause drowned out the boos. We're always going to have, in a democracy, people whose views we disagree with. That's okay. But how can you be a fan and boo your team out? I don't get that. I can even understand booing the other side and booing other players from the other side. How do you boo 11 men who are literally putting it on the line for their country? And so, look, you know, I'm hoping as the tournament progresses, Gareth's leadership comes through and we get more and more applause and hopefully zero boos. I was in Trafalgar Square with our key workers, we had zero boos. We had massive applause for Gareth and the players and stuff, and London's behind them.
Well, London's behind them, and you've had 5 years now as London Mayor. You've got 3 years left in this term. What would you like to achieve? If you had a message to the residents of London, people who were born in London, what you're going to achieve in this next 3 years, what would it be?
The key thing is the recovery. We've got to make sure that the next 3 years sees our city and our country recover from this awful pandemic. It's been an awful pandemic. We've lost more than 300,000 jobs. We've got 1 million people furloughed. We've also had 19,000 Londoners lose their lives. So we've got to make sure we have a rapid recovery. But also, I'm really keen to build bridges, not just with the government, but with other parts of the country. There is, I accept, an anti-London animus in other parts of the country. One of my jobs, Gary...
We feel there's an anti-Manchester animus.
Well, no, and there probably is, by the way. I mean, you look at Westminster and Whitehall, they seem to forget we're one country. And we've got to level up other parts of the country as well as parts of London where there's huge poverty. One of my jobs as the Mayor is to build bridges with our friends in Manchester or Liverpool or Bristol or Sheffield or Newcastle. And over the next 3 years I want to do that. And if politics and football can do one thing, it's unite, United fans and Liverpool fans, and but the good folk from Manchester and Liverpool as well.
Brilliant. Great to speak to you, Sadiq. Thank you. Well done.